Alright, you animated your first smoke. I really hope you found this class helpful and that you know how to go about animating smoke now. Okay, so in this class we've covered what cell animation is, we've gone through how smoke behaves in real life, and we've animated our first few smoke puffs. We even animated a smoke trail on live action footage. And as a bonus, we've learned how to animate smoke in After Effects. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with, so please post your work in the student project folder and keep your eyes peeled for the upcoming feedback video. And remember that this class is just the first in a series of cell effects classes. So make sure to follow me here on Skillshare, and I'll see you in the next one. Looking at the footage in the previous video, we could distinguish a few key factors to smoke that we can apply to our animations. Smoke exits a source fast and slows down rapidly and exponentially. Smoke tends to have turbulence to it, rolling and waving motion. And finally, smoke dissipates with time. So, how do we recreate this in our animations? Well, an easy way to break down smoke and add some turbulence to it is to break it down into an upward wave pattern of rising circles that slows down and get bigger and dissipates the higher they rise. This is a great exercise to get comfortable on how to animate smoke. And if you haven't animated waves before, I recommend you check out my previous class where I show you how to animate a flag. Knowing that will help a lot in animating smoke, as smoke can effectively be broken down into simple wave motions. When animating a smoke cloud like this, I like to think of it as two wave patterns. One standing wave creating a zigzag cloud, making it look dynamic. And then waves on the side creating peaks and valleys, making the smoke look like it's rolling. To make smoke feel organic, it's important that you don't make it feel uniform. Make sure that the sides of your smoke isn't mirrored. Here's an example of a simpler cigarette smoke. This one can basically be broken down into just a wave animation that is eased at the top. Alright, so to summarize this. Smoke tends to exit a source at a high speed, but slow down very quickly. Smoke often has a lot of turbulence to it, and is easily affected by the air around it. And finally, smoke dissipates with time. Alright, so that summarizes the theory part of this class. In the next video, we're gonna start animating. Hi everyone, my name is Johannes Fast. I'm a Swedish animator working in Canada, and I make things like this. In this class, we're gonna learn how to animate one of my absolute favorite effects, smoke, using cell animation. Cell animation is a form of animation where you draw every frame by hand, in contrary to 3D animation or shape animation. So why should you learn how to animate smoke? Well, knowing how to animate smoke is a really simple way to spice up your work. You could add it to almost any kind of media, to your cell animation, to your shape animation, to 3D and even live action. In this class, we will start out by looking at the theory of smoke and how smoke behaves. And we will then move on and animate a simple smoke trail, and then a looping smoke puff, and finally we will add a smoke trail to live action footage. During this class, you'll be given assignments to complete and upload to the student project folder. This is a great way for me and for your fellow students to see your work and give feedback on it. If this is your first time trying cell animation, I'd recommend you to take my previous class on the basics of animation. You can find it here on Skillshare. And every 2 weeks I pick 3 of my favorite student works across my classes to be featured on my Instagram stories. So if you want a chance to get featured, please post your work in the student project folder and add your Instagram handle. A few weeks from now, I'll pick a handful of students to give more personalized feedback to. I'll then make a video where I do a draw over of this work, how I would improve it, and I will then upload this video at the bottom of the video list. So if you want a chance to get this more personalized feedback, please upload your work as soon as possible. And make sure to watch the whole class, because in the end I'll show you a bonus way how to animate smoke. This class is just the first in a series of cell effects classes. So make sure to follow me here on Skillshare so you won't miss the rest. I'll see you in the next video. Alright, it's time we explore the theory of smoke. The reason I always like to look at the theory first, instead of just diving straight into animation, is because it's very important to have an understanding of your subject before you start animating. Especially when it comes to cell animation, due to how labor intensive it is. Back in the old days, animators would get months to do research and planning before starting animating their scenes. Even though most modern productions doesn't have the luxury of months of research, I still highly recommend to research and plan your animations as much as possible before you start animating. So let's look at smoke. Smoke can be made out of a lot of different things, like dust, water vapor, powder from a fire extinguisher, etc. The type of smoke and the source of the smoke will affect how the smoke behaves, and thus it's something you need to take into account when you animate. So let's take a look at a few examples of smoke, and let's try to find some key attributes that we can apply to our own animations. Here we can see a classic chimney smoke coming from a fireplace. Because hot air is lighter than cold air, the smoke rises if it's coming from a heated source, like a fire. As the hot air is rising, the cold air around it is pushing down on it and cooling it. This progressively slows down the smoke as it's rising, and is making it dissipate into the air. This cushion of cold air also gives the smoke its beautiful rolling motion. As the cold air flows over the hot air, it creates turbulence that we can see in this rolling motion here. And if we look down here, it's very obvious that the smoke comes out really fast and then slows down as it rises. Here's an example of a heavier kind of smoke that could be coming from an incense stick or a cigarette. This smoke is heavier than the chimney smoke because it contains a lot more particles than the water-rich chimney smoke. This causes it to form these thick, beautiful trails that holds together, in contrary to the smoke in the previous video that quickly dissipated. This smoke will still ease in as it's rising, but it will tend to stick to its shape, as you can see here. And here's a video of the smoke coming out from one of the space shuttle launches. This smoke behaves almost like the smoke from the chimney. Even though the smoke is coming out of the engines at an extreme speed, the smoke will still slow down incredibly fast and start to form these huge rolling clouds. This smoke is really thick and slow because of the immense amount of water vapor the engine creates. Alright, so now we looked at some reference footage of smoke, and in the next video we're gonna see how we can apply this to our animations. Alright, so as a bonus I'm gonna show you how to animate a smoke trail in After Effects. Here I have a composition that is 1920 by 1080 pixels and 24 frames per second. So I'm gonna start out by making a new solid. Like that. And then I'm gonna go to Effects and Preset and look for Particle Systems 2. And I'm gonna apply that to my solid. Alright, now we're gonna tweak this system here to create the smoke. Alright, so first I'm gonna change the particle type from line to faded sphere. And down here I'm just gonna make this white. Like that. And I'm gonna lower the birth rate here, so we only get a few. Alright, so now we want to tighten these together. So to do that, we go into Physics. And here I'm gonna pull down the velocity. So now it's falling a lot tighter. And then I'm gonna up the gravity a bit. Like that. And I'm gonna add a lot of resistance to slow it down. It's looking like this now. I'm also gonna change the life of the particles so we get a shorter trail. Like that. And in here you can select the size of your particles. I'm also gonna tighten together the emitter here by changing the radius, like this. Alright, so this is what it looks like now. So I'm now gonna just rotate this layer. Like that. And now I'm gonna add some levels to this. And then in levels I'm gonna go to alpha. And now I'm gonna crush this together and you'll see what happens. So now we have a more flatter looking smoke. And then I'm just gonna add a transform to this. And then with the transform, I'm gonna skew it like that. And if we don't want it to start up like this, we can take the layer and scooch it over like this. So now it's just going. Alright, and as a final thing, I'm gonna make a mask for the smoke. So I'm gonna draw a rectangle like halfway through, and then I'm gonna mask it out like this. Alright, so that was a really quick way to make a smoke trail. Hope you find this useful. In this video, I'm gonna talk briefly about what cell animation is, for those of you who are new to animation. Cell animation, hand-drawn animation, traditional animation are all words for the same thing. Cell animation is the kind of animation where you draw each frame by hand, instead of letting a computer do some of the work for you. And this is the way they animated the old Disney classics, like Lion King, Pocahontas, Snow White, etc. Back in those days, they did it with pen and paper, and it required huge teams of animators, in-between artists, cleanup artists, etc. Fortunately though, today we can do hand-drawn animation on a computer using a Cintiq or any form of drawing tablet, and this speeds up the workflow immensely. Shape and 3D animation lets animators key out poses and then use the computer's power to calculate the frames in between these poses. Animating this way is usually a lot faster than animating traditionally. But of course you lose a lot of the qualities that traditional animation brings. The advantages of shape animation like this is that it's a lot easier and faster to do, and that's why we see a lot of explainer videos made in this kind of style. It's also an easy way to get started into 2D animation because you don't need to do any drawing, and it's how I started doing 2D. The downside with shape animation is that it tends to look very flat and undynamic, because you can't really turn a character in 3D space without keying each frame. And if you do that, you're basically doing traditional animation. 3D animation is a great form of animation when you're going for realism. It's also cheaper than traditional animation because you can reuse a lot of the assets. In my opinion though, 3D tends to lack a lot in creativity when it comes to characters. You don't really see a lot of extreme poses or extreme faces, smearing, or things like that. This might change though, looking at how well Spider-Verse turned out, where they blended 3D and traditional animation together.
Like, what's up, danger?
Traditional animation is great when you want to do a 2D animation that is highly dynamic, because you're only limited to what you can do with a pencil. Traditional animation also tends to have very expressive characters and extreme posing, as you can break down your characters and push your extremes very far. A big downside to traditional animation is the extreme amount of time it takes just to create a few seconds. It also requires the animator to be good at drawing, especially if they're animating characters. Personally, I love traditional animation due to the look and feel it gives. The kind of life you see in the old Disney movies is hard to match by shape animation or 3D animation in my eyes. I also love seeing the craft behind it, when you can really feel that someone made this with their hands. There's also this feeling of accomplishment that I get when I do traditional animation that I don't really get when I do shape or 3D animation. And seeing your drawings come to life is just amazing. When we do cell animation, we draw every frame by hand. And this is one of the reasons why we mostly animate on 12 frames per second, because it cuts the work in half without it looking choppy. If you do go under 12 frames per second, the human eye can distinguish each drawing from the other, making it hard to keep the illusion of smooth movement going. It's not impossible though. So you might wonder now why it's called cell animation. Well, the reason for that goes all the way back when we animated with pen and paper. Once the animation team had completed their finished animation, the cleanup team would then take over and trace their work onto thin sheets of celluloid plastic, thus giving it the name cell animation. Alright, so that was a really short summary of what cell animation is. This is a topic I could go on about for days, but I hope this gave you some insight. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so it's time we animated our first smoke. We're gonna start out simple by animating a smoke trail like this. During this class, I'll be working in Adobe Animate 2020. You can use any program you want, but if you want to follow along in my workflow, it's easier for you to work in Adobe Animate. So we'll start out by creating a new project by clicking up here. And here we want to make sure that our width and height is 1080 by 1080. And make sure your frame rate is set to 24 frames per second. And leave the platform type as ActionScript 3.0. So here's our workspace. I've set it up so that every time I click a button, you will see it down in the left corner here. I've set it up so you will find all my files in the Project and Resources tab. So you will find this artwork, you will find all my animations that you can use as reference. So I want to extend this layer here by a few seconds. So I mark the layer here and I click F5 to add frames. And I'm just going to add a random amount of frames here. And then lock this layer so I don't accidentally draw on it. All right, and up here, I have all the colors I'll be using. So to create a new layer, you click the plus button up here, and you get a new layer here. And to easily split this up into sections of 2, you can right-click and go to Convert to Frame-by-Frame Animation, and then keyframe every other frame. And now you have frames here being held for 2 frames each. So for the smoke, I'm going to use this green color here. And I use the brush tool when I animate. So as we touched upon in the theory part, is that smoke slows down as it rises. So when we draw our first frame here, we want to make sure that the spacing gets tighter the further up we get. So I'm gonna draw my first frame here. Something like that. And as you can see here, the spacing gets tighter the higher up it gets. And then we can kind of break this up a bit to make the smoke dissipate. Okay, so now I'm gonna draw my next frame, and of course I wanna see the previous frame, so I go up here and enable onion skinning. So now when I draw my next frame here, I wanna make the distance in between the last drawing bigger here in the beginning, and then smaller as it rises. And then I'm easing out these little smoke trails here. And then I go to the next frame. And because this is a wave, I kind of want to start bending this wave here. And we're doing an organic movement now, so I'm going straight ahead when I'm animating, which means that I start on the first drawing and just go from there, instead of having key poses that I'm trying to hit. All right, so I'm going to the next frame here, and remember to think of it as a wave, so basically it should move something like this. So I'm pushing this up. And then easing these little puffs out here. And I want to ease them pretty slow because smoke is a very slow movement. And the nice thing about smoke is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Because it is an organic movement, it's affected by wind, heat, and all these other things. So it can speed up, it can slow down, it can wave around and move in all different kinds of ways. Okay, so this is what I have this far. Alright, so here we have a few seconds of a really simple smoke trail. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you how to export this animation as a GIF. Go up to File and then Export, Export Animated GIF, and then this window will open. You can turn off transparency up here, and then set looping to forever, and when you're done, click Save. Alright, so for this assignment, I want you to animate a smoke trail like this. I'd like your animation to be at least 3 seconds long, and once you're done, I want you to export a GIF at 1080 by 1080 pixels in 24 frames per second and animate it on 2s. That means that every drawing is being held for 2 frames. Once this is done, I'd like you to upload it in the student project folder so I can see it and give feedback on it. Good luck! And now I'm going to go ahead and shade the smoke so we can see the shape of it a lot better. And we still need to take into account that the smoke is pushing outward. Okay, so here I have my shaded frame. And this is what it looks like right now. So for the next frame, we need to track it onto the ground, but we also need to think about the force that it has shooting outwards. And then we also have the force of Taylor riding through the smoke. So first I'm gonna track it through the ground. So fortunately enough, we have this square, so we know it was in the middle of the square. So I'm gonna make a larger circle here. Something like this. So it's gonna expand out really fast here. And looking at this, I see that the edge is over here, and the edge is still over there on this frame, so we probably want to move it a bit further out. Like this. So now I'm doing kind of an in-between of looking at where my previous drawing was, but also where the ground is on the previous frame. So that the smoke cloud doesn't follow him as he rides, but it still needs to go outwards. Alright, and now I'm gonna do what I did on the last frame and draw in the bottom of the smoke. I'm gonna make this a bit smaller now, because the smoke is shooting out really fast, so it's gonna be dissipating a bit faster. Alright, kinda like this. And now when the smoke is coming out, we can add these lines to kind of drag the smoke from where it came, like this. Alright, and we can play this before we start going any further. So it's moving out really fast right now, but we're gonna slow this in on the next frame. And now I'm gonna add the little smoke clouds here. And to give the smoke force, you can kind of bend it like this. So you feel the force going like this. And we can also cut into the smoke like this. Right, so I'm not gonna shade this smoke now. I'm gonna go ahead and do a few more frames before I add the highlights, so you don't have to watch me sit and clean this up. Okay, so for this drawing, the smoke is kind of going out of frame now on this edge here. So I'm gonna draw this cloud. And I'm gonna slow in these strokes here. I'm gonna start making it a lot smaller. So I'm also gonna think about starting to break up the cloud. Okay, so the smoke here will start rolling over the edge here. Okay, so let's play this and see how it's looking. Okay, so I'm gonna draw the next frame now. And on this edge over here, I'm gonna keep on looking at where the smoke was before. And slow it in even more. I'm gonna start dissipating it. So I'm breaking up the cloud pretty fast now. And on the sides of the smoke, don't forget to curl the smoke around, following the force of the impact. Alright, and I'm gonna keep on easing this smoke out. Alright, so here's a rough of the impact. I think when it hits here, it's probably following the onion skinning a bit too much. So what I want to do is I'm just going to move these smoke puffs here. I'm just going to move them a bit to the side like this. So I'm using this pole here as a reference. but I still want to make sure that I'm following the onion skinning a bit. All right, let's see how this feels. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and shade this smoke now, and after that we're gonna look at adding the trail to the skateboard. Okay, so here's the impact with the added highlights. And now I'm just gonna add a final smoke trail behind the wheels. So I'm gonna do what I did in the beginning here, and just add these little smoke puffs coming behind, and I'm gonna think of them as a wave. So I'm gonna kind of try to track them to the previous frame here, but also think about where they were before. But I don't want them to go behind where they were. And I'm trying not to draw my smoke like this with a sharp edge. I want to get the wave motion, but I also want to get the motion of the smoke on the ground. Okay, so here's our finished smoke animation. I think it's looking pretty cool. Okay, so your final assignment for this course is to animate a smoke like this. Go ahead and use this footage if you want, or you can find your own. Once you're done with your assignment, I'd like you to upload a GIF into the project folder. And if you're not familiar with the Animate and After Effects workflow of compositing your animations, the easiest way to export a GIF is to download Giphy Capture. Once you've downloaded Giphy Capture, you just drag the window over, and don't record too big of a GIF or it will be too big to post to Skillshare. And then you select the area you want to record and hit the red button. Once you're done, you double-click your GIF, and then you select the area you want to see. And down on your frame rate, select high. It's only 23 frames, so we'll be missing one frame, but in this case it will have to do. Then click Save As and save your GIF. And here's your finished animation. Alright, good luck with your assignment, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Right, so now I'm gonna show you how to animate more of a traditional smoke cloud like this. So this smoke cloud won't be looping, so when I do this, I usually just go straight ahead and I animate as many frames that I will be needing. Alright, so I've prepared this style frame here, and I've also made a little chimney reference to know where my smoke is coming from. So before we start animating, we want to figure out what kind of smoke we're making. In this case here, I'm thinking that this is coming from a small fireplace in a cabin. So the smoke will be pretty light. Looking at this smoke here, you can see the S shape going through it. I don't focus too much on this kind of shape when I animate. I just use it as a reference in the back of my head to keep the smoke dynamic. So we get this kind of shape to the smoke, instead of it looking uniform. My main focus is on these waves here. And as we touched on before, the smoke is going to come out pretty fast and then it's going to slow in really fast. So this area down here is where it's going to come out fast, and then it's going to ease in and go slower and slower. So usually when I animate smoke, I have a lot of action happening down here. But then as it goes up into the middle here, it all kind of gets together and slows down. And then up here, it all melts together really slow. Right, so I'm gonna animate on 2s. So I'm gonna cut up this layer here. Like that. And a good thing with smoke is that if you animate your smoke too fast, it's very easy to go in afterwards and just add the frames in between. So I'm gonna start animating this smoke now. And to do that, I'm gonna use onion skinning, so I turn that on. And then up here, I want the smoke to move really slow. So I draw the next frame really close. And then as I go further down here, I'm gonna space the smoke out a bit more. And you also want to think about the smoke dissipating to the sides. Alright, so down here I want it to move pretty fast, so I'm gonna make this bump here, kind of up here. And then we have this smoke coming out here, and so it'll probably be up here already. And to give the smoke turbulence, you can kind of cut in the corners here. And I usually start doing that like around this area here. Alright, so here we have 2 frames. I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next one. So I'm gonna continue drawing really close together up here. And as I go down, it's gonna be spaced out even more. And I'm gonna cut in here so we get the turbulence. So as I push these shapes out here, I also do these holes and kind of like dig into the shape. So I'm drawing the turbulence, imagining it going like this. Now I'm seeing that this looks pretty even here, so I'm gonna fix that. And then moving on to the next frame. I'm gonna cut in even more here. It's gonna help us dissipate the smoke. So I'm gonna cut in here too, because what we want to end up with, we want to cut these shapes off in the end, so we can make them disappear into the air. So I'm thinking of this like a wave here. So this is the previous area, and then I'm thinking that this is getting pushed from here to here. And you can play around by merging shapes. So here we have these two smaller ones. We can kind of push these together. And I'm gonna slowly dig in here. And you want to keep in mind that the higher up you go, the slower the movement is gonna be. So when you dig in here, don't do it too fast, because it will look weird if this is all the way over here now. And you can push the sides out to here, but pull it in here. And your easing doesn't have to be perfect. You can play with the speed going up and down. So here you're seeing it's moving really fast down here, but as soon as it gets close to the middle, it slows down really fast. Now I'm gonna start breaking this shape up here. Okay, so now I have these little puffs here. I'm gonna just ease these out as they disappear. So I'm gonna take away quite a big chunk at the bottom here, but keep them pretty slow at the top. Now I'm gonna break this part off. You can play around by melting together shapes. So I'm gonna put this shape back into the big cloud. And when you animate smoke, don't ease out too much with these small ones. You don't want your frames to go from this and then go smaller to infinity. The final drawing of a small puff can be this size. So I'm gonna continue adding some more smoke on this side. And I also try to vary when I take away these last frames. So here I'm only keeping this one to make it a little bit more dynamic. It doesn't look very good if all of them go out at the same time. And I'm also playing around a bit with the easing here, so it's going a lot slower here in the beginning, and then here it kind of picks up. And because it's an organic movement, you can go pretty crazy with your easing going up and down. But you still want to keep the main idea of it moving faster at the bottom and slower at the top. Alright, so here I'm starting to tie this shape off. Something that also helps with the turbulence is to make it go faster as it cuts in here and then slower on the top. So you get kind of a quick rotation like that. Alright, so here we have about almost 2 seconds. And if you feel like your smoke is moving too fast when you play it, it's really easy to slow it down by just adding frames in between. So I add 2 frames, I cut this, delete that, and then I use onion skinning to see the frame before and after. And now I just draw the exact frame in between here. And then I go to the next one and I do the same thing. And now you can see that where I added those frames is gonna move a lot slower. So that's how I animate a basic smoke cloud straight ahead. Alright, so your assignment is to animate a smoke cloud like this. I want you to animate on 2s, and I want you to animate at 1920 by 1920 pixels on 24 frames per second. And once you're done, please export a GIF of your smoke and upload into the student community. Alright, so it's time we tried animating a looping smoke cloud. I've prepared this asset here that I'll animate, and if you want to animate this same smoke cloud, you can find this file in the resource tab. Looking at this smoke cloud here, we can break it down into the same wave pattern that we did in the last video. But in this video, we will add volume to it. And once we get volume to it, we can start to get the rolling motion that we witnessed in the live footage. When I animate a smoke puff like this, I like to keep the shape kind of like a diamond, so it expands as it rises, and then at the top it kind of comes back in again. And remember that the smoke will come out fast, and it will slow down as it rises. Alright, so to do this, we're gonna do a combination of post-to-post animation and straight ahead. So we'll start with this drawing, And I'm gonna cut this here and delete that. And we're also gonna end on this drawing. So we will be going straight ahead, and then somewhere around 1 second to 1.5 seconds, we're gonna aim towards hitting this pose again. So what we can do is we can take this frame and put it in the middle here. And we can flip it around like that. And I'm gonna make it look just a bit different. Like that. All right, so now we have 3 frames here. And now we can start animating. When you start animating your smoke, make sure you don't space your frames too far apart, because it's easy to animate a smoke cloud way too fast. So I'm gonna go to our second frame here. I'm gonna turn on onion skinning. And in the beginning here, I'm gonna make the smoke move really fast. So this part here will now be up here. And remember to think of this as a wave animation. So you got a wave going here. So I'll push this up here. Kind of like that. And as the smoke rises, it will start moving outward. And it will start eating in here too. And to get the rolling motion, I like to offset the smoke a bit so it rises faster in the middle and slower out on the edges. Kind of like this. Alright, so here we got a second drawing. And if you get these ugly edges here, you can smooth that out by selecting your drawing and going to modify, shape, and then smooth. And I've set this as a shortcut to Shift X. Alright, so here we have our second drawing. And see how fast it moves in the beginning here? And how slow it moves up here. And this part here that moved fast, I'm now gonna slow that down so the smoke here will be up here now. Kind of like that. And remember to step your animation back and forth to make sure you spot any errors. And with these smaller smoke puffs, I don't like making them too small, because it quickly looks messy if you start breaking up your clouds into all these tiny, tiny dots. So don't be afraid to take them away when they're this size. Right, so I'm getting closer to this frame here that I'm aiming for. So I'm gonna start thinking a lot about hitting this pose now when I animating the next couple of frames. Alright, so what I think I'll do is that I'm gonna try to aim that this part here will become this part here. And we're gonna have to add a few frames in between here to be able to hit that pose. Right, so now we're getting a bit closer to this frame here. So I'm gonna start easing this part in to become more like this part here. And I'm gonna introduce a bit more smoke to create this shape here and this shape here. And now I'm just gonna fix these last frames a bit so the looping is smoother. Okay, so this is what we have this far. Alright, so now for the second half of the smoke. Because we took this first frame here and flipped it over to use as a last frame, we're now able to take the animation we did here in between these two frames and duplicate it and put it behind the last frame. To do that, you hold Alt and you drag it over, like that. And we also want to go and flip all these frames over. To do that, we click this button here, edit multiple frames, and you pull out here the frames you want to move. You then select all these frames and go to Modify, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And before we play this, we're just going to extend this background here. Okay, so this is how it's looking. And we can see a small bump as the loop goes around, so we're going to have to fix that now. So the bump is right here in the middle. To fix that, we're going to just go in, turn onion skinning on, and smooth out the in-betweens here. All right, so let's see how this looks. Okay, so it's looking a lot better. But we can see that the smoke kind of slows down here. So what we can do is we can try to delete a few frames here. And I'm gonna do some more fixing here. I think it moves a bit too slow here in the end too, so we'll try deleting this frame here. Now we got a bit of a pop here, so we're just gonna fix that. And to do that, I'm gonna put the first frame in the back here to make sure that I can see the frame I'm aiming for. And we also want to add the smoke trail here. Alright, so here's a looping smoke. For this assignment, I want you to try your hand at animating a looping smoke like this. And once you're done, I'd like you to upload a 1080 by 1080 pixel GIF at 24 frames per second, animated on 2s, into the student project folder. And if you find this assignment difficult, you can always ask a question in the discussion tab, and me and your fellow students can help you as best we can. And remember to upload your assignment as soon as possible if you want a chance to get more personalized feedback in the upcoming feedback video. Good luck! Alright, so for this final animation, we're gonna take everything we learned in the previous lessons and apply it to live action footage. The footage I got is of my animator friend Taylor Peters jumping down a set of stairs on a skateboard. If you want to check out his work, you can find it here. If you have your own footage, you can use that too. I'd recommend you to use some form of extreme sport video with someone jumping so you get the most out of this class. And if you want to use this video, you can find it in the resource tab. To import a video into Animate, you just drag your file over. This window will open, and here you click Embed H.264. Here you can deselect Include Audio. And if your video isn't centered, you can center it up here. So I'm gonna do a few things with this video. I'm gonna animate a smoke trail as he rides up, and a smoke puff as he takes off. And then I'm gonna do a trail as he goes through the air, and finally an impact smoke as he hits the ground. We're also gonna step this up by another level by shading our smoke. So with this footage, there's a few things we need to think about. First of all is that Taylor is moving forward, but we also have the camera following him. This is going to affect how we animate our smoke, because we need to track the smoke to the skateboard, but we also need to track it to the ground. At the same time, the smoke has its own momentum. I'm going to start out by animating the trail as he rides up to the stairs. I've selected some crazier colors for this smoke because a white or gray smoke won't be very visible on the ground. And when I animate a smoke trail like this, I like to think of it as a skewed wave. Kind of like this. And even though he's far away, I'm gonna make the smoke pretty big, otherwise we won't really see it. An easy way to shade our smoke is to use the paintbrush tool by pressing Y. And down here you can select the color of your paintbrush tool. Now you can draw in strokes on top of your smoke like this. And you can then select your paint bucket tool and select the shadow color. You can now delete these strokes like that. And I'm going to turn onion skinning on so I can see where my previous drawing was. So, as I mentioned before, we need to track the smoke both to the ground but also to the skateboard. And at the same time, we need to look at where the previous smoke was so we don't animate a stationary smoke like this. Remember to think of it as a wave. So now I'm both tracking the smoke to the skateboard. I'm looking at this bump here to put it here, and I'm also thinking about tracking the smoke to the ground. And now I'm gonna animate the smoke puff as it takes off. So the force is going this way. Kinda like this. So I'm gonna make my smoke follow that kind of shape. And I'm gonna add the smoke trail to the wheels here. And then for the next frame here, we need to track the smoke, but also think about the momentum of it. So this is how it's looking this far. And now I'm gonna start dissipating the smoke. So I both wanna look at where this frame is, but I also need to track it now. So I'm gonna make it smaller here. And then I'm gonna look at where the smoke was in relation to us. And I'm gonna make it dissipate. And I'm also gonna look at where the trail was, and I'm gonna start following the trail now. Like this. And a trick to get rid of all these lines is just to draw over them like this. And also looking at the onion skinning again, I'm gonna track the smoke towards where it was. I'm gonna add some lines to the smoke so we kind of feel the drag of it. And now I'm gonna make these smoke puffs slow in here. Start dissipating. And even though the smoke was under on this frame, looking at the onion skinning, we wanna put it on top now. Otherwise the smoke will kind of bounce around. It wouldn't make sense if the smoke was down here now. And you can make the smoke drag more by animating it closer to where it was. So as you can see, I'm doing a combination of both tracking but also following the onion skinning when I place my smoke. And now as it's falling faster, I'm gonna make these small smoke puffs come out of the trail from the wheels. And the beauty with this kind of animation is that you don't need to think so much about the wave animation. You just kind of need to make it random, because it's so fast, you're not gonna see it. And these smoke puffs, I wanna make them follow the momentum downwards. And now we're gonna do the impact smoke. An impact smoke like this is kind of similar to the smoke that we saw from the spaceship video. Because he's falling down here, his force is coming down onto the ground and then outwards like this. And as we learned, we want to make our smoke come out fast and then slow down. So for the first frame here, I'm going to make the smoke pretty condensed. And because this is live action footage, we need to take into account the 3D space. We can't just make a smoke cloud like this. We need to look at the ground and place the smoke on the ground. And to help with that, I like to draw a circle like this. And that will be roughly how I'll place my smoke. So I'm gonna start out the smoke pretty close to the skateboard, and then it's gonna shoot out fast and then slow down fast. So I'm gonna make this pretty condensed. And now I have my circle here. I'm gonna go around the circle and add how the smoke looks like on the ground, like this. So this outer line here will be the bottom edge of the smoke. And now I'm gonna add the cloud itself, like this. And as we talked about before, the force will make the smoke roll. So the force going outward, like this, is gonna make the smoke roll backwards like that. So I'm gonna make the smoke kind of look like it's rolling backward, like this. And then I'm gonna fill this in. And then I'm gonna erase where we shouldn't be able to see the smoke. All right, so here we have a rough smoke cloud. And I'm gonna add a secondary smoke to the outer edge here, like this. And this is gonna move even faster and dissipate faster than this big smoke cloud.